My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, and that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Are you a good listener? I think we've all had that experience of talking to someone who clearly is not listening to us. Perhaps it's at a party where there's a lot of background noise and competing interests, and you're there with a friend, and you're launching into a great story that you want to share with him or her, and you realize pretty quickly that that person is simply nodding their head with a vacant stare, or that their eyes are kind of flitting around to other people in the room, listening to their conversations more than yours, or perhaps they even cut you off and shift over to another group. And that hurts. It's frustrating, and it's clearly a lack of basic respect. Or perhaps we have been on the offending end. Let's face it. How many of us have glanced at our phones or even pulled them out when we're listening to someone we find boring or whose conversation we simply lose interest in? And we know it's bad, but sometimes we cave into the temptation, right? I remember hearing of a group of colleagues at work, sort of a work group, that would sometimes go out for lunch together at a restaurant. And they would purposefully stack their phones in the middle of the table there at the restaurant so that all the phones could be seen by everyone. And the first person to grab their phone during the meal and check it would need to pick up the tab for everyone else, right? He or she would have to pay for the whole meal. It's hard to listen, right? It's hard for us to listen well. And why is that, Lord? Well, because we tend to be more absorbed, more wrapped up in our own things than we are invested in those around us. And so we shut people out, intentionally or unintentionally, with the signals that we send, with our body language, our eye contact or lack thereof. Are you a good listener? Jesus, am I a good listener? We can ask Jesus this right now in this time of prayer. Because you, Lord, have been seeking to have a conversation with us, your children, ever since you first created us, ever since the beginning of time, since the beginning of this project of love that you began with our first parents. And we have been spotty listeners at best. Jesus, you sent prophets before you to convey a message, and they're rejected. In the fullness of time, you came in the flesh, and we crucified you. The gospel for this Sunday, the 27th in Ordinary Time, is a parable that Jesus tells, which is hardly veiled. It's pretty obvious what you're getting at, Lord. And I think the Pharisees who listened to you also picked up right away on what you were trying to say. The vineyard owner is God himself. The tenants are we, his creatures, to whom he has entrusted the care of this world. The servants are the prophets sent on his behalf. And the Son is, of course, you, Jesus, the only begotten Son of God. When vintage time drew near, the owner of the vineyard sent his servants to the tenants to obtain his produce. But the tenants seized the servants, and one they beat, another they killed, and a third they stoned. Again, he sent other servants, more numerous than the first ones, but they treated them in the same way. Finally, he sent his son to them, thinking, "They will respect my son." But when the tenants saw the son, they said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, Let us kill him and acquire his inheritance." They seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. They all came on behalf of the Father. Right? All of these servants, these prophets, they came on behalf of the Father. And then, in the fullness of time, Lord, you sent your only begotten Son. The Father is trying to tell us something. He's sending us a message. But the tenants are completely deaf. It's like their ears are stuffed to the message. It's a dark story. It's a very dark story, because their failure to hear is not simply the kind of, distractedness we may suffer, like we mentioned at the beginning, from when we're not listening well at a cocktail party, right? Because our mind is kind of being pulled in different directions. No, the tenants here are not listening because they're obstinately opposed to God's message. They have come to despise the owner, and they shut down any message coming from him with violence. What a sad and dark image. It's an image of the reality of sin. Because, Jesus, we know that sin makes our heart numb to you. It makes our heart numb to God, deaf to God. And the result of this is that we lose any desire to be with him. We lose the desire to second his will, to support his loving project for us. And so we simply tune out. We stop listening. God invests everything into this vineyard. He puts all of the conditions for it to yield healthy grapes, fine wine. Right? We forget this. The owner of the vineyard builds that vineyard with love. He builds it with care, with diligence. But we, with our freedom, have often rejected that project. We've rejected him, and instead of producing healthy grapes, we've produced sour grapes, not fit for fine wine, but only for bitter vinegar. The first reading of today's Mass points to this. It's from the prophecy of Isaiah. "Now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and the people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard." Me being God, right? Judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I had not done? Right? He had put the best soil. He had built a wall around it. He had put a sentry. He had prepared everything so that this vineyard would flourish. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I had not done? Why, when I looked for the crop of grapes, did it bring forth wild grapes, right? Sour grapes. Jesus, this vineyard that you're seeking to construct with such care and love, I want to help with. I want it to flourish because it's still being brought about, right? In a sense, the vineyard is the church. And in fact, Lord, with your death on the cross, this vineyard is being built with a solid cornerstone. You yourself are that cornerstone. And I want to be a helpful tenant in the vineyard of the church. And I do so when I'm a good listener, not like those tenants. I do so when I listen to you in prayer, Jesus, in these 10 minutes with you, when I open my heart in silence and listen to your voice. When I'm attentive to the messages of the prophets that you send, namely the lives of the saints, right? The saints of the church. Do I listen to their message? When I'm respectful and attentive to the voice of the good shepherd in the church that speaks to me through the priests, through the bishops of the church, and especially through the voice of the Holy Father, the Pope, the successor of Peter. Jesus, help me to be a better listener. Help me to break down in my heart any obstinacy to your voice, any deafness. We can finish by turning to Our Lady, right? Mother Mary, help me to be a good listener because you heard the messenger, right? The angel Gabriel is the great messenger of God. He announces to Mary the good news of the incarnation. And what does she do? She listens attentively. She listens with intelligence. And then she seconds the will of God. She says, "Be it done unto me according to your word. And what fruit her life bore. In fact, she bore the Son of God himself. May we learn from her example. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.